All right, welcome back. Sorry to cut you off there in the middle of this disruptive selection, but I lost track of time there. So what we were talking about, remember, was polygenetic traits. Okay, polygenetic traits and how they are affected by natural selection over time. So we talked about directional selection, favoring one end of the spectrums, stabilizing selection that favored just the middle phenotypes, and disruptive selection that favored both ends of the bell-shaped curve to produce two distinct different organisms that create more in diversity within that population. Okay, so some examples here we can see with hummingbirds. Okay, let's say we have different beak sizes. So let's say at one point, these hummingbirds favored, let's say, well, obviously, what do hummingbirds do? So they pollinate flowers, they get nectar from flowers, and uh, that's how they live. So let's say that there's flowers that were select had maybe like a uh, medium shaped canal, and they had a medium size beak. So this was a very selected for trait, and we saw a lot of medium-sized beaks because there's a lot of medium-sized flowers. And let's say that this kind of shifted over time, and we didn't get this medium-shaped flower anymore. We didn't get medium-shaped beaks. Why? Because there wasn't any flowers to pollinate with that size of beak. So the canal of the flowers got smaller or larger, and the hummingbirds had to adjust for that, and it got selected for those two different shaped canals. So therefore, their beaks had to change too. And let's say we got smaller beaks for the smaller canals of the flowers, and we got larger beaks for larger canals of the flower. Uh, and in order to pollinate, they must change that too. So we saw that disruptive selection over time, which once was selected for and not selected for anymore. Another example of disruptive selection would be with rabbits. So at one time, this environment it thrived with gray rabbits. We also had these white rabbits and black rabbits at this time too. Okay, the gray rabbits thrive because they camouflage with their environment. Well, over time, this environment changed, and maybe the environment that they hid in changed. So let's say they hid in rocks, and these rocks changed to kind of a black and white coloration. I don't know, because of the environment change. I don't know what it was, but the rocks changed, and it suited better for the black and white rabbits because they could camouflage better than the gray. So the gray obviously was not selected for anymore because they were getting picked off by predators, and the black and white were not. So therefore, we saw this disruptive selection shift over time with a lot of white rabbits and a lot of black rabbits and very few gray rabbits anymore. So that's what disruptive selection is. So you need to know all of those polygenetic uh, traits, or how natural selection works over polygenetic traits, and those three shifts of selection. All right. So another way to change populations uh, is through genetic drift. So natural selection is not the only mechanism that can change allele frequencies in a population. Genetic drift could occur in the right situations. This is a less likely situation for population change, but we can see this. We've seen this within different populations before. So genetic drift occurs most specifically in small populations. So there's got to be a small gene pool, not a lot of allele frequencies. We don't have a lot of variation, but it's got to be a small population where there is a random change in allele frequencies. So the key word to genetic drift is random. So this is a total random change in allele frequencies that just happen to select for a certain phenotype. So this happens when individuals that carry a particular allele uh, leave more descendants than other alleles. So something dramatic must have happened to this population that it occurred that occurred to make this population smaller. So this example that I'm going to share with you is this example of this flower. We had this field of flowers that were blue colored flowers and yellow colored flowers. Blue was dominant, yellow was recessive. That doesn't really matter. But what happened was maybe this is a pasture. Maybe this is wildflowers in a pasture or something. Let's say that we burnt this pasture off, and the yellow flowers were burned off more than the blue flowers, and this traumatic event happened. We had a small population. Most of the blue flowers survived, and now what do you think is going to happen? There's not many yellow survivors, so therefore the blue will thrive, and just because of random chance, this small population then grows and becomes more blue over time. We don't see this really yellow flower anymore, and that's how um, this characteristic, this trait, could die off over time due to genetic drift. Okay, so some examples of genetic drift here. One example of genetic drift is the bottleneck effect. So the bottleneck effect occurs when events drastically reduces the number of individuals within a population. Okay, so this is why they call it the bottleneck effect. So let's say this is the population within this bottle, and this population is um, has a wide variety of phenotypes. And what happens is this drastic event kills off a lot of them. And what happens is we are just left with a very few samples of what this original population once was. And we can see that we just get a few surviving out of this population because of the bottleneck effect only lets a few of these out. And this reduces genetic diversity in the population. So we see once we had like these yellow individuals in here, did any of the yellow survive? It didn't look like it, and very few of the white survive. So we don't get a very good sample of what this population once was. But you can see that we do have some genes, some alleles that are still within this population. So this population didn't go extinct, but it is very low in numbers, and the genetic diversity is very low because we don't see many variants within this population. This could lead to extinction if these individuals aren't suited for the environment very well. Maybe it was one of the less fit phenotypes or less fit characteristic within this population, and this could lead to extinction. If the few individuals do have the high fitness, so whatever it's selected for, the population could rebound, but also have low diversity. So we can see this in an example of cheetahs when they were once hunted for. We see this in this northern elephant seal. This northern elephant seal was killed off a lot by hunting in a couple centuries ago, and it was down to 20 individuals within this species. They did make a rebound, but their genetic diversity within their genome or within the genome is very low compared to other seals, other species of seals around them. Okay, so that's the bottleneck effect. Another form of genetic drift, so that random chance of changing allele frequencies, is the founder effect. So the founder effect is a loss of genetic variation that occurs when new population is established by a very small number of individuals from a larger population. So what actually happens is we start with this original population, and these individuals decide to up and leave. So they're founders. They're new founders of a different ecosystem. So these leave that original population. Maybe something's happening within this population where they have to get out. Maybe they're overabundance of organisms and they have to get out of there. So these go and find new a new ecosystem to live. Okay, just these individuals reproduce. Okay, so their descendants are going to be this, which is very different than this other founding population B. Obviously get these different phenotypes, but yellow would be the same within them, but we do see this different color here. So each population only has a very low diversity compared to what it once was. And that's the founder effect, is when people leave the population, okay, they migrate out of the population and they start their new population somewhere else. And as a result, there's a loss of genetic variation in the new population that could be distinctively different than the original. All right, so that is section 2 of chapter 18. Good luck on your mastery quiz, and if you have any questions, let me know.